Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Dean Robertson, I'm a solution architect with WorkSoft in the EMEA region. So that means for me right now it's somewhere between good afternoon and good evening. But glad to have you all here. Got a hopefully very interesting next 40 minutes session for you. So if you've joined this session, presumably you've read the abstract for this event and it piqued your interest. We talk about in that abstract about there being some challenges for QA teams in terms of implementing SuccessFactors and working with testing with SuccessFactors when compared to platforms that they may previously use, such as SAP ECC. And we saw from the poll that a lot of the people on this event are ECC users. And those challenges come from a number of different angles. The fact that SAP SuccessFactors is cloud-based is one. We're going to go on and talk about that. The fact that you have quarterly updates pushed upon you, very important. We're going to come back and talk about that later as well. And also there's a new user interface for SuccessFactors. Yay, everyone's saying, great, we're finally be able to ditch the ECC, the SAP GUI. Not quite the case, and this introduces some challenges for the QA and automation team. So moving to SuccessFactors or having a project to move to SuccessFactors really does need teams that you can work in a much more agile fashion. You really do need automation as part of that project. And you also need to have a look at how you're actually managing your best practices in terms of change. So in this session, the agenda, we're going to cover some perspectives about SuccessFactors, some of the things you need to consider. We're going to look at the challenges when that comes to ongoing change management and how WorkSoft with our platform for automated testing helps deal with some of the challenges that are introduced. We're going to do a live demonstration of some SuccessFactors automation towards the end of the session, and there'll be an opportunity for Q&A as Heather already mentioned. So let's get into the sort of meat of the presentation. This slide talks about the evolution of SAP. On the left, we've got what it says current equals SAP GUI. I guess that could be considered past for some people. For some people, the current will be the thing on the right, the Fiori-based user interface with S/4HANA and so on. But the fact is that there is a shift from a fairly monolithic on-premise ECC ERP type implementation to something much more dynamic, something much more digital. We're going through this transformation to S/4HANA. And SAP themselves are really encouraging customers to make this move from SAP ECC into the S/4HANA world and start adopting some of these more digital, in quotes, technologies such as SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, Hybris, and so on. But with that change comes some of the challenges we're going to talk about. Some of the people on the call, I think, are only that we have customers whose first venture into the SAP space is SuccessFactors. We've got others who've been with SAP for many years and are now starting their move. One of the key things is this move is a large project. It's not something that can be taken lightly. It's not something that will happen overnight. And for a period of time, if you're coming from the ECC world into the SuccessFactors and other technologies in the S/4HANA space, then you are going to have feet in both of those camps. And you need to be considering that actually you're going to be working like that for a number of months, potentially measured in tens of months, if not years in some cases, to make these moves. And the WorkSoft platform is really about helping you make that move in a safe and sensible and in as short a time as is safely possible in terms of looking at the risk of those kinds of projects. So what are some of the key considerations around, and we'll focus on SuccessFactors, but actually this is fairly generic for lots of the new technologies. Firstly, it's a cloud-based platform. Organizations and people are used to having on-premise technology, and with that comes certain assumptions about when you can choose to do your releases, how you update it, the availability of it, the performance of it. But when we move to a technology like SuccessFactors, which is delivered as a service through browser as a cloud-based application, then a lot of those considerations start to fall by the wayside. And actually, things like the performance becomes out of your hands. The performance of the application is largely down to the network and the internet and so on. So there's some challenges there around that just for the user. Being cloud-based, the vendors of those technologies, so for SuccessFactors, SAP, they're interested in protecting their environment. So if they deem that they need to roll out a quick patch to their infrastructure to protect, for security reasons, their environment, then they do that. But that could also have a knock-on effect in terms of availability, but also just the way your application functions, and could lead to testing environment. So there's a shift in how you need to think about your application from being on-premise to being cloud-based. The other thing is, this is no longer a monolithic on-premise technology that delivers all of your ERP, your HR, your warehouse management type functionality. We're now getting lots of loosely federated applications and services that have come about through adopting these software as a service applications, but also just the fact that some of these are acquisitions aren't tightly integrated like SAP ECC was. So SuccessFactors and Hybris and Ariba require some level of integration to be able to build out end-to-end test and end-to-end processes within your organization. And much of the work you then end up doing is actually configuration and interfacing rather than actually developing. The projects that you do as an organization tend to become smaller and geared around quick wins. So much like an agile environment where there's a short sprint and deliverables, projects for configuration and change and integration with these new technologies are much shorter and smaller. And then to ensure that they stay like that, automation becomes a key consideration in that space as well. This is something I mentioned earlier. This is very, very important. There are quarterly updates from SAP, and I've put a red asterisk on that to highlight its importance. Not a lot of people know that. There is a quarterly update, and sorry, I've just realized it's very hard for a Brit to do say not a lot of people know that without nearly slipping into a Michael Caine impression. Hopefully you don't want to hear my Michael Caine impression. Not a lot of people know that SAP impose a quarterly update schedule for SuccessFactors. You will get a quarterly update posted into your dev/QA environment, and you have a few weeks, a window of time in which you need to test that. And that's vastly different from the way, as an organization with an on-premise application, you would approach testing, where you may choose to slow up the release cycles because either testing's too painful, the people that are involved in doing the manual testing can't give the time from their day jobs to do it. With the introduction of these cloud-based applications, you are now at the mercy of the release schedule that they impose upon you. And if you are not testing, at least at the same rate, in this case quarterly, that they're imposing their change, then you are exposing your organization to risk. So in that 2-3 week window of every quarter, you need to be ensuring that you are testing your, in this case, SuccessFactors, but all the integrations that you have into your other applications and services within your organization. So it's driving change and it's driving testing requirements, which can't necessarily be met with manual testing. It requires automation to solve this. The other big consideration is this is a shift in the user interface that's being used by the users of SuccessFactors and similar products. We're moving to a Fiori or a UI5 based, web-based automation. And you know what? That's great. For the user, it's absolutely fantastic. We've got people who have, since the launch of the iPhone, have spent their lives using smart devices with a very kind of app tile-based structure. They're listening to music on Spotify, they're watching things on Netflix, they're on Facebook, they're even getting the same kind of experience from their smart TVs. And then they walk into their office and they sit down at a screen and they're presented with the SAP GUI. Not very engaging, challenging for them to work with, not pretty. And what SuccessFactors and SAP have done with the new UI is great for the user. We've got this very easy, very familiar, engaging user interface for them to work with. So from an organizational perspective, fantastic. For test automation and QA type people, it's challenging. It's introduced a level of challenge much greater than was available or was there when you were looking at technologies like the SAP GUI. It's very dynamic web pages, so objects can change their classification very simply. They can be custom, so what might look to the user like a nice tree, actually behind the scenes is nothing like a tree, or a drop-down box is not a drop-down box. So you get challenges with these things. Lazy loading of lists and lightboxes. These applications are slightly asynchronous in that things aren't always there until a user performs some action on them. So from an automation perspective, there are challenges in automating things that aren't there until you actually try to do something with them. They're also very large and complex. The user sees a beautiful interface. Automation tools see what's going on behind the scenes, and in many cases that can be an incredibly complex structure that it needs to work with to be able to perform the automation. And these are all customizable by the user and role, so you can end up with unpredictable structures. And what we like in QA and testing is to be able to predict that if I do the following, I get if then, I get the following result. And when things change, that can lead to breaks. So we need to take these things into consideration when we're building out automation for this new breed of user interface. And thankfully, WorkSoft and our certified platform has addressed many of these things to make it relatively easy for a QA engineer and also the HR specialist or the functional expert to help create robust automation that will work against these new breed of very pretty and useful but also complex user interfaces. So what's our goal with automation? Why is an organization automating in the first place? There has to be reasons for doing this. And we see that really the goal, I mean, fundamentally, everyone wants a low total cost of ownership of whatever technology they're acquiring. But historically, if you go back several years and look at different technologies that we use in automation, the total cost of ownership of those platforms could be quite prohibitive. So the goal with our modern automation platform is to introduce a low total cost of ownership platform that can provide a sensible level of automation for an organization, but also return a high return on investment. So how do we go about doing that? Well, shown over on the left, we've got typical business users, people who would be sitting down working in something like SuccessFactors. These are the people that know the processes, know how the application should behave. And what we want to do is make it as easy as possible to get the knowledge from their heads into the automation engine so that we can turn that into something that is repeatable. So some of the things you'll see in the demonstration are the automation creation capability. This should be as easy and painless as possible. We can involve these users, but we don't want to burden them with it. And it should lead to a very robust set of automation. Once we have that automation, we can start executing it as often as we want. We can use it for multiple purposes. Business process assurance would be the common one. But also we have many customers who are using our technology for robotic process automation. We talk generically about robotic automation. If I can automate a test of a hiring process in the pre-prod environment, then it's not much of a stretch to be able to use that same automation to actually do the same hiring or onboarding process in a production environment. Compliance is another area. Being able to demonstrate to regulatory bodies and compliance and audit type or parts of the organization that actually things are as they should be, and we can prove it through automated testing with associated evidence. And another area, disaster recovery validations. Is my disaster recovery environment working how I expect it to? So I'm testing not just that I can switch my disaster recovery over if I need to, but also is it functioning as it needs to be, testing it in an automated and continuous fashion. And if you get all of those things right, you get an automation environment that is low total cost of ownership, but does deliver a high return on investment. And down the right-hand side in the green columns, we've got some of the areas where we see the benefit areas of our technology that are being reported back to us by our customers. So quality improvement's a bit of a given, really. That's why most organizations would say they do testing. But also accelerating projects, reducing costs through not having manual testers, possibly gaining costs by delivering projects earlier, and there's some gain in that. And that leads to an overall ROI. One thing that is actually not represented on this chart is actually risk mitigation. One of the big reasons people automate is to test, to ensure quality, to ensure they do not have a problem in their productive environment. And you could consider the WorkSoft platform as an insurance policy for your digital transformation. No one actually likes buying insurance, but you can bet when your insurance protects you from something going wrong or pays out when something does go wrong, that's when people recognize the value in their insurance. And that's what WorkSoft Certified and our platform delivers is a low total cost of ownership automation platform delivering high ROI and peace of mind. People sleep well at night knowing that they've tested properly using WorkSoft Certify. The figures that have come up down the right hand side are from a recent survey. So we've we've had some sponsored research performed by the industry analyst IDC. We did one several years ago, probably around 2013, and they came back. They went and researched 12 of our largest customers, came back with some very impressive metrics about what those customers are seeing through the use of the WorkSoft platform. And we've just recently asked IDC to go back and perform a similar type of research. And actually, they went and visited 5 of our kind of largest, most complex organizations and customers, rather. And these are the kind of figures that we're seeing coming back from those customers in terms of what they're seeing from using WorkSoft Certify. But as I say, one that's probably not on here is ultimately on top of all of this is peace of mind, quality assurance. So if you're going through or you're about to embark on a transformation program that is going from something like ECC to SuccessFactors or one of those equivalent new breed of digital technologies, then the only way you're going to be able to really deliver it is to automate as much as possible of that project and the testing, and ensuring that you look at how you handle your ongoing change management. So there's a few key bullet points here. We all know that if you can test earlier in a project, then you can avoid costly rework. But to be able to test earlier, you need to be able to almost insert the testing mentality and the testing approach and paradigm and lifecycle right down earlier into the sprints where they're building out their features. So that's an important capability that needs to be able to be delivered. Project budgets are always challenged and being stretched, and if you're involving manual testing into your project, then that's a big element of the cost that could be removed through automation. But equally, if you're having to then redo testing cycles because of some of the rework, then manual testing just becomes a repeated additional cost. Once you have automation in place, every additional execution of that automation is a return on investment gain. You're gaining value from it with very little extra cost. As I said earlier, the landscape for enterprise organizations now is changing, with multiple different technologies being involved, that very federated and modular approach to a landscape. And when you have that, you've got business processes that are going to be very complex and run across multiple integrated technologies. So as well as considering being able to embed automation principles into as early as possible into the development lifecycle for testing, you also need to be able to consider that as an organization, we need to be able to ensure that our business processes work as we expect, irrespective of the technologies that we have involved in that process. And then, as I mentioned earlier, did I mention quarterly updates from SAP and how they're going to be forced on you? I think I did. Applications change, and it's not just SuccessFactors quarterly. If you've got other software as a service applications, they will be changing on the schedule that they choose to change on. Your own in-house on-premise applications that you still rely on, you've got feed in 2 camps, ECC and SuccessFactors. Those applications still need to be updated and maintained and changed. So you are going to have the combinations of testing requirements become incredibly large, and therefore it's a complex testing environment that cannot be delivered and met and solved through manual testing. Automation really is the only answer. If organizations are looking to get into more agile, right, moving away from waterfall to more agile development methodologies, then yes, there's shortened delivery cycles, but all of that just means that, again, you've got more testing to do, and the only way you can meet those testing challenges is through automation. So let's move on. So what's WorkSoft's approach here to helping in these transformation programs? And it says they're HR transformations, but HR, HCM, any kind of transformation program that's going on. This event is about SuccessFactors, but this is applicable across multiple different transformation programs. So we want to transform the way people work. Historically, in the QA environment, the people who understand the processes, the functional, the key users, the experts on the process, would be required to document their processes, copying and pasting screenshots into Excel or Word, maybe recording a video of what they're doing and passing that over, throwing it over the wall to a QA engineer, as some people pretty it up in the terms of a knowledge transfer, but I just see it as more of a, here you go, this is what you've got to automate. It gets tossed over the wall, and the automation engineers are responsible for then turning what they've been given into automation that is ideally robust and reusable. But that's a very inefficient way of working. You'll have a number of cycles going around where actually you're discussing and trying to work out what's going on. So it's not ideal. I'm going to be showing how WorkSoft's approach to transforming that collaboration between key users, anyone that's doing development, but also the QA engineers. They'll all be able to sit down around a desk showing automation within WorkSoft and all be able to understand exactly what is going on and where changes might need to be applied. It's not that the developer can't understand the process and the process person can't understand the automation. All nice and clean, and you'll see this. It needs to be continuous. I talked earlier about shortened delivery cycles, testing, shifting left in terms of the testing. To do that, because we've got these short 2-week sprints with features being delivered, you can't do that unless you're testing continuously. So in order to do that, you need to have a platform that can execute on demand any test or set of tests you wish it to perform. And in the DevOps world, in the pipeline, many organizations have tools that they have favored for sort of orchestrating and managing that pipeline. We're going to be showing an example in the demonstration of Jenkins as an example of a tool in that pipeline orchestrating, but also performing executions of WorkSoft certified automation to meet the demand for the builds that are coming through. Our technology is also extendable. I said at the start about the user that comes in having listened to Spotify on the train and watching something on Netflix, and then comes in and sits down at a desk and is using a slightly old-fashioned UI for ECC. Well, those people are now starting to use, those same people are now starting to use their devices for business purposes, whether it's filling in expenses while you're out, or agreeing a hire through a SuccessFactors web interface. Mobile is becoming increasingly part of the end-to-end processes, so we need to be testing those as well to ensure that the mobile element is correct, but also feeds appropriately into through integration into the other federated and modular parts of the landscape. And it also needs to be intelligent. Our platform is intelligent. We have capabilities within the platform that allow us to, when a new version of an application releases, we're able to publish what you could consider a knowledge module, which is a definition of how to understand some of the complexities that sit behind the scenes of that application. So existing automation ideally continues functioning when we've plugged in these new modules for the new versions. And the automation itself is actually very easy to understand and maintain and update. So we're going to be showing some of these things in the demonstration when we get to that. This is slightly tangential to the session, but we're seeing more and more organizations taking a DevOps approach, talking to us about continuous integration, continuous testing. And this was a recent report, the 2018 State of DevOps report that came out. And yeah, I'd suggest it's a big read. There's a lot of pages, but it's worth taking a look at. But some of the key findings in there, the report surveyed many organizations who are adopting or have adopted for some time DevOps methodologies in their environment. And what this was designed to do was to basically give an idea of what characteristics would be associated with organizations that are particularly well evolved into that space versus someone at the start or perhaps not done it right. And one of the summary findings that came up was that actually within DevOps there's many paths to success, but actually there's even more paths to failing. So this report was designed to help people organize themselves and gain some insight from others. But one of the key things that came out on it was that actually the most successful organizations, the most highly evolved, are those that actually scale their early success, and they do it by prioritizing basically building blocks that can be reused. So down here we're seeing that in a low evolution organization, people are building things out, they're sharing information, they're building out automation for parts of the pipeline, but actually they're keeping it within the team. Whereas at the other end of the extreme, the highly evolved and well-practiced DevOps practitioners are actually sharing that information across teams and across the rest of the organization. So we wanted to put this in just to bring this to your attention as a report that's worth reading, but also it kind of fits with some of the ethos of WorkSoft about being able to build things that are shareable and reusable across the organization. And there is actually a similar bar chart in this report around automation. And the most evolved organizations are building automation, not just within their teams, but actually for others. And this proportion of the graph is much higher. So worth a read. But yeah, it's all about sharing an automation and doing it early and promoting it as best practice across the organization really does lead to a highly evolved DevOps implementation within an organization, supported by lots of different automation technologies, not just WorkSoft certified, but automation in principle. So we're getting close to the demonstration part of the session. How do we as an organization, what do we have in our platform that helps us and helps organizations, our customers, accelerate that move? So doing things like shifting the testing left to reduce costly rework, shortening project life cycles, helping be more collaborative with the people who really understand the process. And to do that, we've got several elements of our platform that we bring to bear on that challenge. We have something called our business process discovery engine. This is, and we will see each of these things as I go through the demonstration. This is basically where the subject matter expert on the application can sit. So as part of, let's say, a sprint, when there's a feature has been produced, the person that understands how that should be tested and how it should function sits down and simply just walks through an activity with that application, and that's going to be captured using our capture engine, which then gives us several potential outputs. One of them is a very rich documentation of the process that was just captured, which can be reused for multiple purposes, and I will show this as well. We're also able to visualize the process. So you see a quick example down here, and I will show an example in the demo. But being able to see the process flow and variance of it becomes quite a useful output of this. But also, what they have done is immediately available as automation for the QA person, the automation engineer, to take on board and turn into a robust and repeatable piece of automation that then gets pushed into the library of automation that can be run on a continuous basis, and can also then be reused as part of an element of a larger end-to-end process. And I'll show you an example of that when we get into the demonstration as well. So we have our platform enables us to support that transformation within organizations, and doing it without the risk, lowering the cost, accelerating project timelines, eliminating costly rework, and so on. So let's look at stage one of this. So the first stage is, as I said earlier, there's a feature, we've had a sprint, and if we talk about the sort of scaled agile framework, then it's the quality gateways and the features that are being produced. At that point, we would ask someone to actually sit down and capture out the activity that they need to perform. And that's going to result in some automation that we can immediately start executing. So let me switch to my demo environment. And in here, okay, my session has expired. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this down, and I'm rather lazy. Rather than log in manually, I'm actually going to use WorkSoft Certified to get me into SuccessFactors. So I'm just going to use a piece of automation that's going to take me into SuccessFactors. So I'm logging in into the best run applications SuccessFactors environment as a user, Charles Richardson, and I'm going to take on Charles's role. So Charles is a sort of functional person, understands how he wants to use the automation, how he wants SuccessFactors to function, and I'm going to take on his role, and I'm going to create a very simple. Let me just move. I've got some of the controls in the way for the GoToWebinar. I'm going to take on the role of Charles, and I'm going to walk through one of his activities that we would like to have some automation generated for. And to do that, we use part of our platform called the capture engine. So this is a lightweight agent that sits in the system tray of the user and is designed to capture their activities when they're about to perform something interesting. So let me, I'm just moving some of these controls out of the way. Let me start the capture here. And of course, this could be sort of sitting behind the scenes. I'm just leaving it up for this demonstration purposes to show what's happening in the background. But what I'm going to do is walk through and capture a simple example of creating a job requisition. So I'm going to come to the home screen, and it's under recruiting. So select recruiting. And you'll see we've already got one requisition here. I'm going to create a new requisition. And if you'll notice on the right-hand side, the capture engine is giving me a kind of commentary of the step-by-step activities that I'm performing as the user. What are the objects I'm interacting with? So I'm going to create a simple job requisition. This case, it's going to be from a blank template. And I need to fill in the job title. Now, if I've not done a good job of this, it may well be that we have a position vacant for a solution architect in EMEA next week. So I'm going to put in that as my, let's go for the 3rd of the 12th, 2018. So I'm going to create a requisition for a solution architect in EMEA that's due next week. Click next. And I probably ought to say that this is going to be in London, seeing as that's where I am currently. So let's say London is the location for this requisition. And then finally, save and close. So a fairly simple scenario that I've walked through as a user to do that. But you'll notice on the right, the capture engine has been monitoring those interactions that I've had. It's turned them into a narrative describing what I did, the inputs and so on. And we could stop there, or we could give the user that's using this capture engine a bit more training to say, you know what, when we get to this stage in the automation that we're about to generate, I'd like a screenshot to be taken. So I'm going to add a screenshot step in. I also want to provide some comments to the automator that's going to take this and make it more robust. So please verify rec ID is created and store the rec ID. And my colleague Chris, who's on the phone, always says it's an unwritten law that it's impossible to do a demonstration and type at the same time, and I've just demonstrated that. So please verify that the rec ID is created and store the rec ID would be a comment to the automation engineer. I'm going to stop that capture. What I'm going to do now is post that set of activities, this sequence of activities. I'm going to post that into our business process discovery engine. So I'm going to say save to analyze, and let's give it a name. Webinar SF create rec, for example. That's going to be sent off to our analyze engine, which I'll authenticate to for the first time today. And that's been sent into analyze. So what does that mean? I've sent it to analyze. Well, the activities that I performed as a user have been packaged up and posted into the engine. If I come over to the captures in the WorkSoft analyze engine here and select captures that have come in the last 10 minutes, have been posted in the last 10 minutes, you'll see here's the one that I just actually posted. This was my capture that I just performed here. And I can do, there's a number of useful outputs I can generate from this. So let's generate some documentation first of all. Let's call this SF webinar. Proving that rule again, Chris. SF webinar, and I can template this. I've created a template for the best run, the SAP sort of sample company. I'm going to generate a PDF here. So that's been queued for generation. I'm also going to create automation from this. And again, we'll just give it a name, SF webinar, and create that automation. So we'll come back and look at the automation in a moment, but let's look at the documentation first. Let's change to workspace view. And I'll come back and look at this workflow and show you that in a moment. But if I come to my documents, we'll see we've got a document has been created here. And this particular document is a business process document of the activities that I went through as the user when I was actually doing that capture that I just performed. So you'll see here we have screenshots have been inserted in for the screens. We've got this idea of the narrative, which was I brought to your attention in the capture engine. So I selected recruiting from the home menu, home module drop-down menu. the capture engine is taking screenshots of the various things I interact with, through to things like, yes, I clicked on create new. If we go down, we'll see where I put in things like the job title, so solution architect EMEA, and the date, and finally all the way through to actually creating the requisition, selecting London, and so on. So one of the outputs of this is documentation that is now an empirical view of how that user wanted that activity performed and how they did perform it. This can be used for training, many other purposes. It can become process documentation that you can associate into your ALM technologies, but fundamentally with no effort on the part of the user other than going through this technology and performing the capture, which I'm just closing down now. We've got rich documentation output. Let me come back and go back to this process flow just to show one of the other outputs. For hide the filters, we've got here process flow representations of the various captures that have been posted into the environment. Very quick to touch on it. The idea here is we can start to see how people are using the technology, what flows they're taking, where there's some commonality. So it's a useful, it surfaces some useful information from a testing perspective of where are the things that we're seeing that are common across our organization and where are we seeing anomalies. And of course, if we spotted an anomaly, we can then immediately go and say we want to create automation from it. So that's the discovery side of things. What I want to do now is just go and actually take and consume that automation into the automation part of our platform, Certify. So I'm going to come to a folder that I've got here and just say what I'd like to do is import some automation from Analyze. That's going to connect to my Analyze instance. And there's the piece of automation I asked it to generate a moment ago. I'm going to select that, and all I have to do is drop it into the right part of our repository. It's a SuccessFactors piece of automation, and import that. What I now have in my environment here is a set of processes that represent the activities that I as the user went through pretending to be Charles Richardson, that represent the various stages of that automation. So if I open these up, we've got the create new job requisition. We'll see that same idea of the narrative being carried forward into the automation that we see here. I left click the simple job requisition link. I clicked the new job requisition link. I then put in solution architect EMEA and the date. So a person not familiar with automation will be able to sit and review this narrative and understand what's going on and point to where there may be errors or misordering or some additional steps needed. They're not looking at code or any kind of programming language that makes up the automation. It is a very simple to follow narrative that describes a sequence of steps that need to be gone through. I don't need, as a person automating, I don't need to understand the process that they're going through because I can see roughly what they're doing here, and I can, this is now automation. So similarly, if I come and look at this one here, we'll see where we left click. So it's been broken down into chunks for the various things that we selected. So there's the London and saving and so on. So I'm going to come back to this automation in a moment and go through what we call a hardening or a refinement, polishing process with it. We need to take this and do some things to it. We need to make it data-driven. We need to add some verification into it. But I'll be doing that in a moment. What I wanted to show you is that this is the kind of automation that we can then immediately, once it's been refined, move into continuous testing part of our pipeline. And to that end, I have here running Jenkins, popular tool used to orchestrate in a DevOps pipeline. And I've got a build here that's doing SuccessFactors nightly build. So the idea is, as part of whatever that build is and all the other things that get orchestrated within it, one of the sequence of steps is that Jenkins will make a call to the WorkSoft platform to have the tests associated with that particular build be executed. So what I want to do is just open up, I'm going to open up something that allows me to spy on what's going on in the background into our execution manager engine. So let me just log on here. What I'm going to go and do is look at the, in fact, I'll leave it on this screen. This is allowing me to sort of inspect what the various technologies that exist in your landscape, such as Jenkins, such as TeamCity, Team Foundation Server, Visual Studio, what they are asking WorkSoft to do in terms of testing. What I'm going to do here is trigger from It appears like I've got to do lots of logins today, which then brings up the whole, can I type and present at the same time? Looks like I can this time. So I'm going to build this particular project, which at the end of the build is actually going to make a call to Certify platform to actually then perform that execution. So if I now come back here, we'll see that was building. If I now go to running now, we've now got that create job requisition test running. I can kind of spy on what's going on. So actually this is running on, and I should have just turned the sound up on my phone. Well, here actually I've just received an email telling me that this job has been started executing. I can come and look at the resources. These are the sort of test lab machines that are performing the scalable execution of these tests. And if I zoom in, we'll be able to see in here in a moment. I'm basically spying. Why would anyone do this? If you've got an automated technology, you wouldn't sit and watch it, but without sitting and watching it, it makes for a very dull demo. So I'm looking at what Jenkins has asked, in this case, the Certify platform to do, and it's to execute the create job requisition set of tests associated with that particular build. So we'll see here it's logging into SuccessFactors. So this is taking place on a machine remote somewhere. I think this one may even be on AWS. So you can scale. We've only got 4 as an example, but you can scale out your testing to hundreds, if not thousands of machines to meet the testing demand. And this is going to go through and actually follow pretty much exactly the same sequence of steps that I just performed earlier. This was one I built earlier, but we'll see it going through and actually creating a job requisition. I'm just looking at the time. Once this is completed, what I had planned to do was come back and show some of the maintenance efforts and refining and polishing the automation. There are numerous YouTube videos available on that. So once I've got to the end of this, what I will do is show the principles of taking in this, which you could consider maybe a unit test or a small test, and building that up into an end-to-end test that then provides a more functional process test from end to end. So where we're nearly completed, we're just filling in the locations for this. There's some verification steps have been added into this automation, so it checks that there is a job title there with a request ID, requisition ID, and it stores the requisition ID for use downstream in a longer running program process. And then finally, tidying up, it logs out of SuccessFactors, but also logs out of the resource. There's the email telling me that that successfully, yes, it passed. And if I come back to Jenkins and come back to my dashboard, now we'll see last execution 2 minutes ago and last success. So yep, so that build triggered from Jenkins within Jenkins resulted in an execution of some tests within Certify. If I come back to Certify very quickly, what we would be doing, we would want to be polishing and refining this and making it part of an end-to-end process to do so it can be used as a process test as well as a test of a particular feature. To do that, we'll construct an end-to-end, excuse me, an end-to-end process. So I'm going to create a new process here. Let's just call that SFE to E. And this process needs to use other pieces of automation. So actually all of these are key. I want all of these as part of my new process. So I'm going to drag and drop these in sequence, but also I need to log on and log off, and I need to launch a browser and close the browser. So I've got existing, we talked about sharing being good. I've got some existing pieces of automation here. I've got one that does a launch browser, logs into SuccessFactors, logs out, and then closes the browser. So I'm going to bring these into my end-to-end automation, drag them in. And I've just constructed an end-to-end process from pre-existing pieces of automation just by dragging and dropping them together. Now, obviously, some of these are out of sequence. So these 2 steps and this one are not in the correct sequence. They should be at the end. But if I drag that down, I've now placed them in the right point. So I've now got individually, each of these are tests that I can use to test new features, unit build, unit tests, but combined together give me the opportunity to test across my highly federated landscape of technologies that cross from mobile into Salesforce, out of Salesforce into SuccessFactors, into SAP ECC, warehouse management, whatever it might be. So what I'm going to show now is an example of one of these running. And I'm going to do that via a video just so I can scrub through it very quickly. And let's quickly go to that. And I'm going to click run on here, and I'm going to scrub through. So this is Certify automating an end-to-end process test that crosses multiple different technologies and involves multiple actors. No one process that you have in your organization is going to be all performed by one person. So in this case, we're using Certify to actually drive PowerPoint to sort of signpost where we are. It occasionally brings up its own execution screen, so we can see that actually things are happening, even though it appears nothing's happening. In this case, we're doing some web service calls to validate addresses. But the scenario here is we have a candidate who is seeking a job role. And they're going on to a SuccessFactors career portal, and they're applying for a position. So we'll now see the automation of, in this case, one of my colleagues pretending to be the candidate is going to log in, and they're going to go through the process of actually applying for a position within an organization. So Rick there is applying for a position. I'm going to scrub through this, but basically filling in many of the screens, uploading his CV there. And then finally, we're done with Rick applying for the position. Let's just scroll forward, slightly forward. Now we have the hiring manager, or sorry, the recruiting manager, Tessa Walker, in the best run environment. She's going to be receiving potential candidate information from people who have applied for that. She's going to be performing database checks to check whether they've previously been employed or not. She'll be using email to actually share some potential candidates with the hiring manager. But all of this is automation of multiple users. So in this case, you can see we're now signed in as Tessa Walker. And she's actually going to take that candidate and move him straight from ready to hire, sorry, from background check to ready to hire. So we see here the automation is now selecting Rick, moving him to ready to hire, applying that update. Something else you may not notice that's going on here, all of these users are using different browsers. So cross-browser testing is obviously very important, being able to do that. Automating other technologies such as, in this case, Outlook. So Tessa's going to be sending an email to a few people. So let's scrub through this. So Tessa's sending an email, again, all automated. And then we get to the hiring manager, Jada. Jada happens to do everything on an iPad. So WorkSoft is now driving a physical iPad to log in as Jada and perform. In this case, she's going to take Rick from ready to hire to onboarding. So she's going to bring up SuccessFactors on the iPad. And it might be a bit small for you to see in terms of resolution, but she's going to recruiting and she's going to take Rick through to onboarding. Let's scrub through from there. So mobile testing is covered by the WorkSoft platform. And then we talked about people having feet, organizations having feet in both camps. Let's get to the stage where, yeah, we're ready to onboard Rick into the organization. But actually, we still do payroll and onboarding through SAP ECC. So Stephanie here is going to log into the SAP GUI, and she's going to perform PA40 for those that are familiar with it and onboard this person into the organization. So an end-to-end process, multiple actors, multiple roles, multiple technologies, all achievable by building up the building blocks of automation through that capture capability that involves the business users, refining it, being able to execute those continuously as either feature type tests, unit tests, rolling them all up into functional tests that could go cross-platform. So I'm going to stop that there. Final slide from me, and then we'll get to questions, is, if I skip through these, one slide. This is a screenshot from a video that I think is available on our website. Most of you probably won't know this gentleman. His name is Manuel Hermoso Martinez. You won't know him, but 3 things you should know about him. He's an SAP test lead. He's an SAP test lead at a company called SAP, and he's the SAP test lead at SAP. And this is him presenting at SAP TechEd just a few weeks ago about why SAP IT internally use WorkSoft as their testing platform. So great endorsement from SAP in terms of why this is the right kind of technology. And this video and the link will be available online afterwards. So apologies, I've run probably a couple of minutes